Welcome to the New Life Ministries podcast. We know that being patient can be difficult, especially when a crisis is speeding towards us. Have you considered what it is like to be patient, waiting for God to do what He wants to fix the problem? Today we consider why the Lord's solutions are often better than ours, and therefore why being patient matters.
Today we're going to look at 1 Samuel 16, page 434, if you have one of these Bibles, New Life Translation giant print. On a scale of 1 to 10, how are you at being patient? I have a friend, when I talk about patience, he will go, patience, yeah, how long will that take? And decades later, I learned that that's a line from the Arrogant Worms CD. So he's been quoting it all this time, and I didn't know it. You ever been waiting for someone to come over to your house, and they're late, and you're waiting, and they're late, and you're not sure what to do with yourself because you're waiting? I have learned the best way to get someone to show up is to go use the bathroom. That is when they will ring the doorbell. So today we're going to talk about being patient. But we're going to talk about being patient with God. So today is Palm Sunday, when we celebrate that Jesus is King. He is the promised eternal King from the line of David. And in today's passage, we're going to hear how David was appointed to be that king. So in our story, Saul is the current king, the first king of Israel, and he's been told that his kingdom will be removed from him. And so today we're going to learn how that replacement comes about. Let me offer a prayer, and then we'll read 1 Samuel 16. Father, may your word go forth this morning, and may you draw us to the truth that is in this passage. May we be drawn not just intellectually, but may our spirits be drawn to you, to rest in you, to trust you, to abide with you as we've been talking about all morning. I pray for this room. I pray for some of the emotions and some of the issues that are present, that your word would speak and heal and provide the hope that often we need. And I pray this, that you would be glorified. Amen. So 1 Samuel 16. Now the Lord said to Samuel, "You have mourned long enough for Saul. I have rejected him as king of Israel. So fill your flask with olive oil and go to Bethlehem. Find a man named Jesse who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king." But Samuel asked, "How can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me." "Take a heifer with you," the Lord replied, "and say that you have come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you which of his sons to anoint for me." So Samuel did as the Lord instructed. When he arrived in Bethlehem, the elders of the town came trembling to meet him. "What's wrong?" they asked. "Have you come in peace?" "Yes," Samuel replied. "I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice." Then Samuel performed the purification rites for Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice too. When they arrived, Samuel took one look at Eliab and thought, "Surely this is the Lord's anointed." But the Lord said to Samuel, "Don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." Then Jesse told his son Abinadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, "This is not the one the Lord has chosen." Next, Jesse summoned Shimea, but Samuel said, "Neither is this the one the Lord has chosen." In the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, "The Lord has not chosen any of these." Then Samuel asked, "Are these all the sons you have?" "There is still the youngest," Jesse replied, "but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and goats." "Send for him at once," Samuel said. "We will not sit down to eat until he arrives." So Jesse sent for him. He was dark and handsome, or some translations, ruddy and handsome, with beautiful eyes. Probably didn't need to add that part. And the Lord said, "This is the one. Anoint him." So as David stood there among his brothers, Samuel took the flask of olive oil he had brought and anointed David with the oil. Then the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on. Then Samuel returned to Ramah. And we're going to stop there. So we're going to start by looking at Samuel, because he seems to be in a bit of a weird spot. Like verse 1, God says, "You've mourned long enough for Saul. I've rejected him as king." Like, hey, pay attention. Like, you know what's going on in the story. And then verse 2, Samuel says, "How can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he'll kill me." Like, of all the things they've gone through, that suddenly that's the threat. So I wonder if Samuel is feeling lost and confused in this situation. I can imagine him thinking, Saul was a bad choice for the king, but he's still the king. And how will God remove kingship from him? And when is it going to happen? And what kind of mess is this? And how are we going to move forward? And everything's falling apart. And that he's just filled with worry and regret in his heart. And his concern about anointing another person is that will look like treason. Putting a new person in charge while the current one is still in charge, that's treason. So maybe Samuel could not imagine that God would take that path, instructing him to initiate treason. So to kind of absorb what this passage says, I think we need to consider when we are in a similar boat, which we've been talking about all morning. When your situation feels like a mess and you can't find the way out, and there's sadness and there's grieving and hesitation, and the solutions that come to your mind all feel impossible or perhaps wrong, and it's just confusing. And part of the lesson here is to see that the Lord is going to address the problem His way. And we can learn how the Lord works. We can sort of see how He approaches it. But we have to learn to wait, to be patiently waiting for God to solve the problem and do the work. And that doesn't mean sit back and do nothing, but we understand that our resources, our abilities and perspectives are very limited compared to the Lord's abilities and perspectives. So we're called to patiently wait for God to act and solve the problem, to settle down, offer the situation up to God in prayer, and to wait. And then, the stuff that we know to do that. Because the other option seems to be, I'm going to frantically work to solve this problem. We have to be patient. So a couple things to learn from this passage about being patient for the Lord to work. So verse 1, God says, "Go to Bethlehem, find a man named Jesse who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king." A more literal translation would be, "I have seen a king for myself among his sons." And the Hebrew word to see dances all through this passage. What we look at versus what God looks at, what we focus on versus what God focuses on, what we can see versus what God can see. The Lord's eyes have been roaming through the land, considering who would make a good replacement? Who do I see that would reign properly? Now, back in chapter 13, we were told that God had already done this work. He'd actually already made the decision. Samuel said back in chapter 13, "The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart," or "The Lord has sought out a man according to his own heart." And that can mean three things. It can mean the Lord has made his own selection for the replacement. The Lord has selected the guy that He wants to be king. It can also mean that the person selected has the same heart that the Lord has, the same value system, the same priorities. The Lord has sought somebody who has a similar heart to His own. And it can also mean the Lord has selected to seek someone, the Lord has selected somebody who will seek Him. The Lord sought a man after His own heart. Someone who is pursuing the Lord. And you might think, well, which option is it? It's all three. If the problem is who will make a good king over Israel, the answer is somebody that the Lord has selected, someone whose heart is similar to the Lord, and someone who is pursuing the Lord. So the Lord's answer is somebody who is aligned with the Lord in a very special way, a person who seeks to do things the way the Lord wants. So for us, when we are patiently waiting for the Lord to solve a problem or to resolve a situation, it's helpful to know God's solution is going to be in accordance with his own heart, in accordance with his own ways. Because our solutions, or the ones that we can imagine, pretty commonly involve some level of dishonesty, perhaps, or corruption, or a lack of courage to be faithful, or even perhaps we would land on a solution that doesn't quite honor the Lord's authority over us. If that's the solution we land on, that is not going to be God's solution. And how often our thinking for a problem, our thinking of how to solve a problem, comes from our own wisdom, our own best laid plans, our own way of viewing the world, and then we expect God to bless that. And instead, to know the solution that God has is going to come in a way that is completely in alignment with who he is. So we have to patiently wait for the Lord to arrange his solution, his type of solution that is in accordance with his ways. So Samuel is told by the Lord, I have seen a king for myself. Go to Bethlehem. Samuel goes to Bethlehem. He sees Eliab, and he goes, surely this is the Lord's anointed. Oh, this is God's will for us. It is so obvious. Look at how perfect this solution is. This is a grand idea. I am so impressed. And it's interesting that God's answer, the solution to the problem of who would be king, wasn't even in the room yet. Like, Samuel will look at 7 sons. 7 is a perfect number, a complete number. Samuel is looking at all the possible solutions to the problem. And God's solution isn't even in the room yet. We have to be patient for the Lord. All of our solutions might not include the one that hasn't come in the room yet. So back to Eliab. Samuel looks at this first option and God says, don't judge by appearance or height. I've rejected him. I've not selected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So another way to translate don't judge by appearance is don't gaze at his appearance or at his height. It's not the word for to see that dances through this passage. It's the word for stare, for gaze, for focus, for being fixated on something. Wow, that's the answer I want. That's the answer that it should be. We have a way of being so impressed by our solutions to a problem that we can be fixated on our solutions to a problem. And God is saying, don't do that. Don't gaze at that. I'm looking at something else altogether. So the Lord is looking at the heart. And if you remember when we talked about Proverbs last year, the heart isn't where your affections lie. It's your deep sense of motivation, your deep sense of right and wrong, what's most important. There are good things in your heart, but there are also lies in your heart. There are things we do, things we commit to get control, things we commit to get our needs met. That is all in our heart. And I imagine when God is solving a problem and he's calling us to be patient, he's looking at what is best for this person's whole being. Not just what solves this problem, but what would actually help their heart find more truth. What would help their heart be more devoted to the Lord, to be more clear in its connection to Jesus. Because some solutions to problems might solve a problem, but it might actually be bad for our heart. A solution that calls us away from the Lord, or a solution that reinforces lies, those are not good solutions, even if it solves a problem. So God is looking at what's the solution that calls this person to faithfulness, to purity, to gentleness, to the giving of self, to relying on the Lord. I mean, you get the picture. So when I talk about patiently waiting for the Lord, I'm very aware that that's a simple sentence to say. Sometimes there are problems that are pressing and urgent, and they make us frantic, and we pray to the Lord with urgency in an unsettled soul. I cannot frantically fix this, or frantically, I cannot fix this. So what do I do? And I was talking to my friend about this sentence, and I said, there's three things in that sentence that are wrong. Three things we need to turn away from. Little Sesame Street game. Three things don't belong here. One is that I can fix this problem at all. Like, I might not be the one to provide the solution for the problem. So a sentence that says, I have to frantically fix this, take the word I out. Put the word the Lord in. The second is that frantic is part of the solution. It has to happen now. Hurry, this has got to go. Blah, 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 blah. Frantic isn't always part of the answer. And sometimes the answer is much more paced, much more spread out over time. It's thicker. And the third is that it's a fix. It might not be a fix. It might be a change. Because if I was to exaggerate a little bit, if the problem is people are not doing what I say when I command them to do it, how can I fix that? You're like, well, no, fix is the wrong problem. You need to change to it's time for me to learn to care for others and give to others rather than getting them to follow my instructions. Like sometimes we try to fix the problem to get it back to how we want life to work. And God's like, actually, this is all one big bungled mess. I need to change who you are and redirect how you live. So we're not necessarily fixing things. It's changing. So we have to wait patiently with the Lord instead of this, I have to frantically fix this. I cannot frantically fix this. So the Lord has seen someone he wants to be king over Israel. He has selected that man to be king. And God tells Samuel, go anoint him. And Samuel says, how can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he'll kill me. The Lord is arranging treason. The Lord is arranging for someone else to be king while the current king is reigning. If we consider Jesus, who is the eternal king, who sits on, the throne of David that is being built in this passage, Jesus is God's solution to the problem of other things claiming to be our God. When we follow Jesus, we're actually committing treason against things that would claim our allegiance, which is why it can be such an uncomfortable, nasty battle. So there are many powers that claim to be our authority. Some of those powers will be ourselves. I am my own authority, which means God is going to work for you to commit treason to yourself so that you rely on Jesus. But there's other voices, right? Greed, lust, corruption, violence, all the voices that say you have to act this way if you're going to make it through life, if you're going to be successful, if you're going to get what you want. Those other voices that call us, they're not interested in your well-being. Like, they're not interested in drawing you to the Lord. They're not interested in leading you in the way that God designed life to work. They're not interested in leading you down the path of joy and peace and patience. Those other voices, we'll talk about this next week, those voices that call us to act a certain way, they don't love you. They're not trying to help you live the way God would have you live. So we're called to commit treason to them. On Palm Sunday, today, we celebrate that Jesus is king, but those other powers are still claiming to be king, to want our loyalty. So we follow Jesus. This is part of our waiting for the Lord. Not what will frantically fix my problem, but what is the Lord doing to lead me that my allegiance would land with Jesus? How is the Lord working to release me from these false gods, to confront the truth, to confront the lies that are in my heart, to lead me to commit treason so that my allegiance is with Jesus? That's part of being patient. This is a much bigger story. So new life to me feels vulnerable right now, not just today, but in the phase we're going through. There's a whole lot of health uncertainties in a whole lot of our people, too many of our folks. And we know that for most of us, learning to be a disciple is this continuous journey of relearning how to live and how we think about things and how we relate to people and confronting lies in our heart. Like, there's work in being a disciple, and we also have a lot of folks whose health is uncertain. So New Life feels vulnerable. And it's easy to land in the I don't know how to proceed category. And whether it's your own health or whether it's caring for New Life, I don't know how to proceed. So this week I was reviewing Acts chapter 2, pondering the life of the early church and asking, is there anything we're missing as a church that is contributing perhaps to that sense of vulnerability, or that is maybe just pulling us away from where we need to be? And it was interesting. So Acts 2:42 starts with, the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper, and to prayer. We do all of those things. And then it says, a deep sense of awe came over them all. And the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And then it continues with more activities that they did. And as I pondered the passage, I thought, we're doing all of the activities in this passage, like point for point. But that one line we can't do, which is that the Lord would bring a sense of awe over us. Like, that's his job. And that miraculous things would happen. That's his job. And it just caught my attention. And I wondered if sometimes we are so wound up inside with our concerns, the things we pray about each week, the things we share with each other. And I know that there are also secrets that, we keep in our heart that we don't share with the crowd. I wonder if we're so wound up with our stuff that we need to learn to settle into being patient and waiting for God, to be patient with God, and to settle into the calmness of waiting. Lord, here is the problem. I cannot frantically fix this. I can't fix this, and frantic isn't going to get me anywhere, and I'm not sure fixing's the right word. I'm going to patiently wait for you. And as a group, we're going to patiently wait for you. We're going to wait for you to arrange your solution, your way, according to your heart, because I know you know the whole story, Lord, and I know you love me, you love us, you know what is best for us, and you do what is best for us. So I wonder if there's a step in making space for God, to make space to wait for God, that we would have an expectation the Lord will be with us in an incredible way. We're going to calmly wait for him. And I'm not even sure exactly what that means in the service. Like, I'm not asking for 5 minutes of silence. I'm not saying that. I think it's an expectation that when we come together, we are also meeting with the Creator. We are following Jesus, who restores us to our Creator. He knows the problems, and we have to gently wait for him. And in that waiting, to allow the sense of awe to come down. That sense of awe because the Lord is with us. Because you can't do that if you're rushing. So let's talk about this passage. How does this passage challenge you? Let me give you a little review. The Lord has decided to solve the problem of a king that's not loyal to him by selecting someone according to his own heart. And he sends Samuel to go anoint this new guy, to begin the process of treason. And Samuel sees a great solution in the first son of Jesse, and God says, don't stare and gaze at your own solutions. That's not the one. God's solution to the problem wasn't in the room yet. God's solution will align with God's heart. When God's working on a solution, he's looking at our heart. What's best for them for real. And his solution will draw us away from false powers that claim our allegiance, and we will commit treason and be drawn to our allegiance, our devotion to Jesus. So we patiently wait for the Lord. And at New Life, in our gatherings, maybe we need to somehow settle into the calmness of waiting so that the Lord can bring his presence, his healing, his sense of awe over us. Right, we're not alone here. The Creator is with us, is restored with us. So how does this passage challenge you? How does it spark your thinking?
I love that idea of the difference is the awe of God. And I got thinking, how do we block his awe?
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of things that I know in my life I cannot see. Awe being the unexpected, being the vast insanity that suddenly happens, and we just sometimes gloss over it because we're not looking for it. We're not expecting it. We're not calm enough to see it, and we're running on autopilot. That whole idea of going through the motions of our day, we never look around and see the sunset. We never look around and see the beauty of the flowers. We can't hear God. And that got me thinking back to 1 Kings 19, where Elijah goes up on the mountain and God says, I will pass before you. And there was a wind, a huge wind, and God wasn't in the wind. And then there was an earthquake, and God wasn't in the earthquake. And then there was a fire, and God wasn't in the fire. But you had to wait, and you had to listen, because there was a small voice that came, and God was the voice. How much of my life is so busy that I'm just missing the whole picture. God directing things because I'm so caught up in the moment of, I got to get this done, I got to get this done, I got to get this, because we're always behind, right? Life is always trying to play catch up. But maybe we just need to be still. Still is something we don't do well in this society. We're constantly trying to bombard ourselves with stimulus. And stimulus is the opposite of stillness.
Yeah, I like it. I also think awe is not just being impressed. I think this is a C.S. Lewis idea. I think it's the texture of the atmosphere in the temple of God. That in God's presence, there is that tangible experience of beauty and of majesty and of something other. And that when we settle and God's temple and earth overlap, we get a taste of, that overwhelming, this is so good sense can come back on us. It's temple. It's God's, this is what God's surrounded with all the time. Yeah, really cool. Thanks, Paul.
What struck me this morning was actually something that struck me when you were talking about this passage earlier this week. And it was just that sense of following God is this act of treason. And what immediately had struck me when you were talking about it had been that so aligns with like when someone is being poked at by God and they're from another faith.
Yeah.
And I realized as I've gotten older, seeing other people walk that very tricky walk, that there seems to be this expectation that if you confront people with enough truth and you show them all the things, that will convince them, and that'll be the thing that pushes them over that edge, that gets them to understand that God is there and God is there for them. We forget that there's that essential act of treason. We're expecting that walk through the door, it's the first son. Oh, beautiful, wonderful, oh my gosh. But that's not what it is. No, God has to be that push over the edge. There's nothing that we can do to get to that point because we're expecting the first guy. Ooh, la la. It's so beautiful. But that's not it.
Cool. Thanks, Jessica. Jessica gets a preview of my talks as I'm processing it out in my head. And this particular week, there was an image that needed some AI work, so she even got more of it.
I was thinking about David after this happened. He went back to the fields to watch his sheep. Something rather remarkable had just happened to him. And he was supposed to wait and wait and wait. Now his brothers would not have been impressed with David. Being the youngest of 10, a bit of an idea what that's like. You know nothing, and then you get older and you still know nothing. And then you get really old and you still know nothing. And then you get married and then all of a sudden you know something. But anyway, David was there in the fields watching those sheep, trying to be patient. God told him he would be king, and he must have thought to himself, how the heck can this ever happen? I'm a nobody. I know nothing. All I know is how to herd sheep. How could I ever become king? So it was a really tough situation for him, and yet he was patient, and yet he continued to follow God, and yet he trusted God that he would do whatever he would do. Of course, there were many times he was afraid he'd get killed, and then, of course, God would be wrong. He would not become king. But David was really afraid of that. There are lots of passages in the scripture which talk about how fearful David was when Saul came after him with an army to capture him and kill him. That's just a remarkable story, and I really relate to that. Poor young kid.
Yeah, he must have still been really young, because obviously Dad didn't think there was any point in even calling him in, right?
Right.
Like, dude, you haven't even been bar mitzvahed yet. Let's just leave him out to keep things rolling while we all go do something important. Interesting to me that Samuel just about fell into the same ditch that got them Saul in the first place. Oh, we got Jason Momoa last time. Okay, that didn't work. This guy's Chris Pratt. We want this one. Like, we want this big, handsome, but guy. Look at him. Except it's fascinating to me that God, the first time was like, okay, let's try that. Oh, that didn't work. And I think part of it was that those two, the oldest brother and Saul, they were already men. They were already men. They had kids. Like, Saul already had Jonathan when he was, like, he couldn't have just been like this young dude who wasn't even married and had no kids yet. He was already a man who had a family.
Right, because that would be the responsible guy to put in charge. Like someone who's actually got a responsibility.
Maybe. Yep. Except that if God's saying he's looking at hearts, he's saying, like, I already know what this guy's about. He's already had, decades to prove it. This is where he's at. This is kind of what we can expect from him. Same with Eliab, is that his name? Yeah. It's like, this guy's already kind of set. He's set in his path. Yeah, he's handsome, and he knows it. Yeah. But he is, like, he looks kingly, but I know where his heart is. It's whatever it is. And whereas David was still somewhat unformed. Like, he was still, at most, a teenager, right? Like, he was kind of like Hiccup from the Dragon. And he was sort of, gangling and not really sure, but trying stuff and learning how to fling rocks at lions. So he was gutsy, but he was kind of like the last one that you would sign up, because he was literally the smallest. So because he knew that God had favored him and had chosen him from the time he was quite young, he grew up with a different mindset than Saul did. Right? So it's like God's like, I need to get in there earlier because I don't have a family to train him. So I need to get in there earlier and say, you're the guy. But then he still had to wait, because you're not going to put a non-royal teenager in charge of anything. That's also stupid. And so he had to wait to grow up. And for me, Saul's life from that point on just feels bizarre, because Samuel has told him, yeah, you're done. You're out of here. But you have to stick around and still keep the wheels on the bus on the country for a decade. How much more?
He reigns for 42 years in total.
And how old was he when David was anointed?
No, I don't know.
Okay, so a while, though.
It's a while for David.
A lot of years. There's a reason why when they fire you in a corporation, they get the security guy to walk you out so that you don't wreck the place, right? Because you're mad. Whereas God is kind of like, sure, why don't you just stay in charge for another decade at least? and continue to act like a really destructive weirdo, plus try to kill the guy that we've just hired to take your place. Like, yeah.
Right, because
Fascinating.
because the next couple, for the next many chapters, there's this Saul and David, Saul and David, Saul and David.
Yeah.
And if you think of exactly what you just said, older guy holding his reign and this young kid who's not ready to reign,
Yeah.
what a mess.
No wonder Samuel was like, God, do you know how people work? Do you know how this works? Because there's sometimes God does stuff with people, you're like, that's never going to work. That's not going to go well. You're like, do you know that he's going to think I'm doing treason? You know? But you can tell from the way God responded that he didn't think Samuel was being uppity. He was asking a legitimate question. He's like, no, I got a plan. Let's sneak it this way. Interesting.
I know. There's God being sneaky. Okay, bring a heifer. What you're going to tell them? God is instructing me on how to be sneaky. And you thought God was all one way.
Been thinking about what it means to wait for God, to patiently wait for God. If we're in Samuel's shoes here, okay, it's a son of Jesse, and all the sons parade in front of him. No, not that one. Okay, God, this one. No, not that one. Surely this one. No, not that one. And then the line ends. So if I was Samuel, I'd be like, okay, God, did I miss something? And then for Samuel to ask the one important question, are these all your sons? I think that is also an example of waiting patiently. So when we wait, we don't necessarily have to second guess ourselves. Waiting is an act of faith. What does that actually look like? Well, I think it looks like doing what we already know. So Samuel was there. He knew that it was going to be one of the sons. And then we wait for the things that we can't do. We can look at this from a small point of view in terms of this week, right? I can get ready for my test that's coming up. I can show up on time. I can have the forms filled out. I have no control over what the test is going to show. I'm not going to be able to look at it. I got to wait for the results. We are waiting for Jesus to come back again, just like the people during Palm Sunday were waiting for the Messiah. And so what do we do in the meantime? Well, we do what we already know. And when God shows us something else that we've waited for, then we do that. And so it's relational waiting, or it's faith-based waiting. It's not a passive, oh, I'm just going to sit here and do nothing. So then what does that mean for me for this week? Yeah, so it's kind of what's going through my mind.
That's beautiful. I love that. Because there is a way of going through all of the activities you have to do and be frantically trying to fix the problem, or you could be doing those same set of activities. God's in charge, and if I miss a step, he's able to put the step back in. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, we're going to stop there. Let me offer a prayer, and then we'll close with a song. Father, I want to circle back to praying for new life, and that you would remember. I know you remember. I would ask that you would act, and remember that there are parts of our community that are vulnerable, and Lord, there are folks here who could use some healing in all kinds of ways, physical, emotional, whole being kind of healing. There are ways that we need to change instead of perhaps just fixing. There are ways we just need to abide in your grace, abide in your truth, abide knowing that you love us and Jesus is redeeming not just us, Jesus is redeeming the planet, and to just live in that truth, in that presence. Father, glorify yourself here, that we know you are with us, but glorify yourself so that when people are here, they know it's not just a group of people, that there is something more, that the divine is here. And may we be faithful to our allegiance to Jesus, may we be faithful as your servants and to doing the work you give us to do. Thanks for this morning. Thank you for this week and the special week that it is. Amen.
Thank you for listening to our podcast today. New Life Ministries is located in Winnipeg, Manitoba. You are invited to join our service in person or over Zoom. Please use the Contact Us link to send an email to the church office and request the address or Zoom link. If you would like to use these podcasts as part of your home church or local church gathering, you are free to do so. We do request that you let us know. If there is any other way that we can help you in your ministry, please send us an email.